This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups, and my guest today is Glenn Tranter. Glenn, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Hey, Kevin, really pleased to be here.
So tell our audience a little bit about Glenn Tranter.
Yeah, I'd like to really go back to my childhood. I spent my first 14 years on a 1,200-acre farm that my dad managed. So a strong work ethic was built into me from a very early age. Um, I started playing in a semi-professional basketball league when I was 16 years old, so when I was still at high school. And I wanted to be a professional basketballer, but injuries and a lack of ability sort of parlayed that goal that I had. So I found myself into IT, and I worked exceptionally hard in IT, worked for a US company.
Mhm.
I worked my way up through the ranks, and in I was ended up looking after Southeast Asia for a division, and that was in 2006. And I used to work just crazy hours. So
Mm.
my wife would tell me that I couldn't keep it up. So it was a terrific advice, and I just ignored her. And the reason I ignored her, I was very successful. Most years the business divisions I run had double-digit growth. I made more money than what I ever thought I could make in my entire life. Um, and I was enjoying what I was doing, and that work ethic that I had inbuilt in me as a child, it really shone through, and that all came to a screaming halt in 2006 because I burnt out.
Mm.
I burnt out to the extent that I was unable to work for 15 months. So
Wow.
that advice that my wife gave me, I really should have listened to. So that was a very humbling experience, a very character building experience, and a challenging experience to get through. And one of the things to get better, I was doing meditation, and that wasn't the only thing that got me better. And being an athlete, having an athletic background, if you ever had an injury, you would strap it up and get out there and keep on playing. Well, when things are happening to your mind, you can't really strap your mind up.
Mm.
And that was something that meditation really helped me with. And I was at a Zen monastery. My 16-year-old son was only 2 years old at the time, and he was running around the Zen monastery, kicking a soccer ball around. And I was there for an hour talking to the chief monk, or the head monk of the monastery. And he just wanted to improve. He was a Vietnamese guy, and he wanted to improve his English. And what he did, he said to me, "Oh, you seem to be getting better." I said, "I am." He says, "What do you want to do when you go back to work?" And I told him all the negative things that I didn't want to do, because I
Mm.
didn't want to go back to the world I was coming out of. And he said to me, "I think you should help people." And I'm like, "How can I help people? I've got no idea." And he goes, "Oh, time's up." So he left me a week to ponder that thought, which was very clever of him. And I worked that out in a week's time. So I got into productivity. I worked for essentially a time management company where it was helping people achieve their work far easier. And I
Mhm.
spent 8 to 9 years there, and absolutely loved what I was doing. And then the directors fell out of love, and they shut down the east coast of Australia one day. So I came home and I was cooking on the barbecue. I told my wife, Sam, and I worked out my own business plan it was literally on the back of an envelope. And I'm going, you know what? I'm going to do this myself. So hence Glenn Tranter Consulting was born in 2015. And what I do is I help people and businesses be more effective at what they do. So it's a productivity lens that I look through. And I absolutely love what I do. And it just has me jump out of bed every day.
So I see a lot of people that are kind of in the consultancy space in various capacities. So what is the when you're talking to an SME, company owner or whatever, what's the biggest hurdle that you have to overcome in their mindset, or any objections that they have or whatever, to really get them to buy into the need for your consultancy services?
Yeah, it's a really good question that you ask. And I think it's important as to who you talk to. See, I like talking to the decision makers.
Yeah.
I've got experience in running businesses, so I've got a real understanding of what's going on. What I do know is there's a significant difference between being busy and being effective.
Mm,
And I've been guilty of that in my life. I don't think I would have had, I'll call it a breakdown in 2006 if I wasn't so busy, if I was more effective of what I was doing. So what we've really got to understand is whether or not people are achieving their targets, and if they are, great. But if that's the case, what's the impact on the individual? So is it scalable? Is it sustainable? So we really start focusing on those aspects. So a business that's doing well are prepared to invest in their people a little bit more on that angle. The business that isn't doing so well, so the people aren't necessarily achieving their targets, then it's really about freeing them up so they can spend more time on the things that really matter, so they
that's
can
good.
make a difference. So it's really having that business discussion.
If you had to kind of identify a very narrow niche that you really drill down on in your particular consultancy space, what would that be?
Well, I would say that's all changed. I would say with
You mean just
COVID-19, that
recently? Yeah,
is,
that's
yeah,
exactly
just
right.
recently, absolutely, completely changed. And really, this topic of startups, it's really interesting because the whole world's almost a startup with what we're going
What
through
a
at the
great
moment.
analogy. Yes.
Yeah, it really is. So let's talk about me for a little moment here. Is that um, 2 weeks ago, I had 2 months worth of work that disappeared overnight.
Mm,
So that was 2 months worth of work on speaking engagements, of running offsites, of running training programs, of running coaching programs. Now, a number of those things could be moved to online, but because of the fiscal impact on the organizations, they're a little bit unsure. So that
yeah.
disappeared overnight. So I'm not going to get any speaking engagements for a while, I'm going to guess. Um, so I really had to just flip my business literally within 2 days as to what makes sense. And one of the things that I do when I coach people in productivity is that they might be working in an office, they might be working from home. I don't really care where they're working. So it made sense to me to put more on an emphasis of helping people to work from home, because a lot of these people at the moment, they haven't asked to work from home and they've been thrown in there. And what we do know about people who work from home, some people do it really, really effectively, whereas other people are quite ineffective at doing it. They actually work longer hours. So they think reducing the commute, that they'll work less hours, but they're actually working longer hours,
Mm,
getting less done. They think that they'll get more done without the interruptions from a business of being in a busy office, but they find there's a greater number of distractions at home. So, and they procrastinate more, even though they know exactly what to do. So it's a real issue that a lot of people are struggling with at the moment. So, and what I'm seeing, what's happening in the market at the moment, there's this bit of a panic. Hey, we've got to get everyone working from home. Let's get everyone Zoom access. We could at
mm,
least communicate.
yep.
And a lot of people are thinking this is a technology issue. It's not a technology issue. So technology is something that supports it.
Hmm.
It's it's more of a people issue. So it's really about how's the team going to engage? How are they going to collaborate? How's the individual going to get the work done? And I see there's a really huge niche in that for me at the moment. So
Hmm.
not for the people that are doing it well. It's for those that are struggling with it.
Yeah, and I think that I mean I love the way that you've kind of identified this new, opportunity in the midst of a crisis, because I cannot agree with you more that I think that when we come out of this, we will be changed irrevocably. So I mean I think that there will be, you know, business as usual will not exist on the backside of this transition of this pandemic, because I do think that companies that kind of have had to transition to a more remote workforce, their employees will not want to go back to the way it was before, or they'll see real benefits in this dispersed, workforce if they've been successful in transitioning to it. So, I mean, would you agree that you think that's coming?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's coming for a number of reasons. So one is that it reduces their real estate costs and the expense of
For
running an
sure.
office. There will be the people push being the other angle. But what's not really being spoken about at the moment is that it's a tough economic climate that we're looking right into at the moment. And some companies, the worst phrase I've heard over the last 2 weeks has been stood down. There are
Mm,
people being stood, quite a number of really good operators are being stood down.
yep.
And there will be more of that to come. So my concern is with people that they can present themselves in their best light and demonstrate that they're making a really, really positive contribution. Now, the other side of this, the flip side is um, we know that a lot of jobs are going to disappear because of machine learning, because of artificial intelligence, because of robots as well.
Hmm.
So work as we knew it is changing anyway. And I think that aspect just speeds up because why while technical equipment can get viruses, they cannot get the coronavirus,
Right.
and I just think there's Silicon Valley companies who are seeing this as a real opportunity for
Hmm.
themselves.
Yeah, I could not. I mean, once again, I applaud your kind of your foresight to be able to look into this crystal ball of the future and kind of see where we're headed. And it's almost like a futurist approach that says, this is exactly what it's going to look like in 3 to 6 months. And companies that can't make this transition are going to, I think, find it very difficult. Not just even if they survive economically, I think they're going to have more competition for hiring top talent if they're not offering these more flexible working arrangements and just the differing way to do business in kind of this next 2.0 phase that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. It's such a change situation. But I always come back to it. It's some really basic principles that we have to do. And what we have to do is we're employed to do a role and we've got some form of targets. And people have varying degrees in their ability to achieve those targets.
Hmm.
So a 4-day work week is a push that's really happening, and that's going to slow down, by the way, at the moment with what's everything that's going on at the moment. Um, but at the heart of the 4-day work week is you've got to be able to do 5 days worth of work in four.
Hmm.
And so therefore the heart of that is productivity. In essence, it's productivity. Now, it's an initiative that works because it's a win-win situation. It's a win for the company to get productivity gains. It's a win for the individuals to get the same pay of doing 5 days worth of work in four.
Yeah.
And we've never had these situations because it's normally been the company has taken the productivity gains. So lots of different dynamics are happening at the moment with what's going on, but it will still ultimately be we have to get our highly important work done. We've got to make an impact. So how can we amplify our own impact? And I think productivity sits at the absolute heart of that.
So you made this transition in what you said 2015. You kind of went on your own and
Yep.
started your consultancy.
Yes, that's correct.
So was it kind of an upwardly growing hockey stick graph until the virus hit, or walk us through kind of the last 3 or 4 years and what's
Yeah.
been the progression of you launching out on your own?
Yeah, it's really I think it's a great question and it's really interesting. So it has gone and been in an upward projection. Um, in the earlier days, nowhere near the speed that I would like it to be. So one of the dangerous sides of me is I'm a perfectionist, and I've learned to monitor that, and it's something that I have to keep an eye on. So the day I decided I'd go with my business, this other organization had dissolved. All of the consultants had been let loose. Everyone had attacked the marketplace. So the marketplace disappeared overnight. So when I say I started with zero, I started with zero. So, and I was able in my first month, I got a couple of gigs and I thought, hey, this is pretty cool. But what I also did, that perfectionist side, I wanted to do a really good job. I wanted to put meat on the bone in my subject matter.
Mhm.
And I joined a business school called the Thought Leaders Business School. And it was probably the fourth most expensive investment I've made in my life. So very big investment. Haven't got the revenues to justify spending that amount of money, but I wanted to do it right, and it was absolutely terrific. So it was a 12-month school. Did all your learning via video up front, and then once a quarter you would go for a 3-day immersion with 150 other um, thought leaders from around the country, and you'd put your business plan together for the next 90 days. It was quite overwhelming of being so green walking into a room like that. And, that green-eyed comparison came in for me. And
Yeah.
I started thinking, I'm not doing a good enough job. This isn't good enough. And if anything, that slowed me down. And that's nothing to do with the business school. The business school was absolutely fantastic and gave me lots of support. That was a me thing.
Mm.
So, and it took me a while to overcome that. Um, but the growth has been steadily heading in the right direction. We've looked at markets along the way and got some of them right and got some of them wrong. So in 2016, I wrote a book called Rapid Response, and
Uh-huh.
it was how IT executives deliver excellence into the business. Because I came out of IT, I wrote that book. Um, and it's my glorified business card. And I still give it out to even non-IT people now, because
Mhm.
the book is productivity book. All of it's a productivity book, but 70% is valid for anybody. And the reason I wrote it was the IT sector was going through is it was becoming more of a commodity. So
Mm.
there was less resources, but more work to do for a number of organizations, not all of them in the IT sector, but a number of them. Um, so that was something. And coming from the IT industry, I knew I had to put IT on it, otherwise they wouldn't want to know about it. So that was one niche that I went after. But what I'd done this year was really about scaling my business. So I'd set up two really good strategic relationships where things were about to take off, and COVID-19 has just shut those down and probably shut them down for 12 months, I'd say.
Wow.
So hence, I just needed to pivot the business slightly again.
Yeah. And you're it sounds like you're very market sensitive, and that you can really kind of read where the market is going, and a lot of that, I mean, nothing is wasted. I mean, I've interviewed 150 plus people on the podcast, and you can kind of see their story unfold as they're talking, and nothing is wasted in this economy, and in the economy of their life and their experiences and the hard knocks and the obstacles, and where they are today is really just a culmination of so many things that are kind of built together. And it's so interesting to see, and you're a perfect example of this, that the thing you're doing now was built over many many years of experience and relationships and knowledge and wisdom and mistakes made and all this that are now coming together so you can speak wisely into the life of someone else. I mean, I just love
Yeah.
that story.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm one of these people. My best learning style is typically by making a mistake. So I can sit in the classroom and
A lot
learn,
of us are like
but
that.
yeah, yeah. And it's normally I got to touch it, feel it, and then scratch my head and I go, well, if I had my time over again, I don't think I'd do that again. So um, one of the things, though, besides being a productivity coach, a business coach, a leader, a mentor, I was a basketball coach for so many years. It's not funny, and coaching is coaching. So
Yep.
there's such a difference between coaching and mentoring. And to me, coaching is about asking really good questions. So I know when I was a basketball coach and we were running highly sophisticated offenses and defenses, and if I'd say to one of my players, if they got in the wrong spot, they might have only been 2 feet out of where they needed to be. And if I told them where they needed to go to, it generally didn't resonate. When I took the time to ask them and say, hey, Harry, why are you standing there? Where should you be? that's when the penny would drop.
Mm.
So a lot of what I do is I think I'm a people person. And so much is I love asking questions. I'm really, really so inquisitive about what people do. Why do you do it that way? Does that make sense? And often people tell me stuff. I look at them and I go, I don't mean to be rude, but I don't buy this. I don't buy this whatsoever. It's not making sense to me. Can you step me through again or explain it in a different way? And it's really interesting because they start exploring their thoughts at that time.
Yep.
And so to me, good coaching is about asking really good questions. And at the moment, all I've done is I've asked people around, asked business leaders, what's keeping you awake at night?
Mm.
Um, Individuals, for them, people are concerned about job security at the moment. People are
Yep.
concerned about how they can be effective. Leaders are concerned about, well, how can I get my team to collaborate? How do I know what they're doing? How do I make sure we're making progress? Because we're all up against this at the moment. So we've all got to be pulling it together in the right direction.
I love the whole coaching analogy that you just kind of unpacked there. I'm a lifelong sports fanatic. So
Mm.
and basketball was certainly a very just a centerpiece of growing up. And my family and I, we were overseas for a number of years. We were in Western Europe, and my son actually grew up in Western Europe. So he grew up playing soccer, where I grew up playing, the American sports of, American football and basketball and baseball. And we would look at the strategy, like we would be sitting there watching, say, a soccer match or a football, European football match, and I would say, okay, I want you to look at these guys and these player movements and tell me why you think, did he do the right thing at that time or not. And my son would look at me, he said, how do you know the strategy of soccer when it wasn't even a sport you played growing up? And I'm saying, son, this is just basketball. This
Yeah.
the strategies are almost universal, of spacing and, you know playing your, if it's a man coverage, if it's a zone, if it's whatever. I mean, just figuring out where the ball's going to be. It's
Yeah.
like Wayne Gretzky said, I skate to where the puck is going. you know
Yep.
I mean, it's not
Yeah.
I have to take it there, but it's just interesting how universal the strategies are. And now that my background's in business now, there are so many things that are just interchangeable, that from a strategy, viewpoint. I mean, sports is such a great metaphor for life, just
Oh,
as a
yeah.
whole.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I just think a game of basketball, it's about spacing and movement. And
Mm,
sure, there's skill sets underneath, but spacing and movement. So we have Australian rules football here. It's similar.
yep,
Soccer is similar. All
yep,
these ball sports and team sports, they're very, very similar.
yep.
And
I mean, Phil Jackson made a living, coaching the Los Angeles Lakers with a very simple offense that just happened to move people around in space. So it was really interesting to see that, for sure.
the, the same offense he ran with the Chicago Bulls, and they
Exactly.
won like 6 titles with that.
Exactly. But when you start with Michael Jordan, you've got a pretty good foundational piece. So yeah, there's
Yes.
definitely that. And hey, there was a famous Australian that was the centerpiece of that offense that played the
Yeah.
post. So
Yeah, Luke Longley,
yeah, absolutely.
absolutely. And I was in the 90s. I was in Chicago for work because head office of the IT company I was working for was based in Chicago. So I actually got to see Michael Jordan play a game, which was just incredible.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you talk about, he's like Secretariat, the racehorse. His heart was bigger than every other horse. Michael Jordan's heart was bigger than any other basketball player probably that's ever played the game. I mean, he absolutely just willed himself to win. I mean, it was
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was just incredible he was the Shane Warne of the of the basketball court, for sure. So
You're demonstrating your Aussie sports here.
well, we lived in England for a while, and I knew that he was the arch nemesis of England cricket. So it's
That
just
he was.
for sure that, yeah, he was a four-letter word in England when it came to cricket, for sure. But
Yeah.
anyway, I digress.
Yeah, but I was just going to say it's really interesting you're saying about the heart that Michael Jordan had and that drive and that desire. In business, the other end of the scale, we see that because there's some very, very dedicated business people, is one of burnout.
Yep.
So that really needs to be monitored and that needs to be managed.
Yep.
So, particularly if you've got conscientious people who are perfectionists, who are driven, that's a very, very dangerous mix. Now, they're fantastic attributes to have, so don't get me wrong. Um, but it gets to a certain level where it can become a tipping point. And that's how I help a lot of business people around that level of just reconciling about what's important,
Mm.
because we can't keep on taking on more, more, and more, and it builds up like a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
So we've got to get to a level and be able to manage it. And when you mentioned before about my experiences, if I didn't burn out in 2006, I wouldn't be qualified to talk about that.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think I've
Yeah.
got quite a little bit of qualification there around that.
That's perfect segue into the next question that I wanted to ask you. So as we've got people listening to the podcast that are kind of going through this transition, the maybe they're going from the brick and mortar, going into a cubicle or office, space to more remote work. Can you speak into their lives a little bit? Give us two or three pointers that you would give, that you could almost give us a mini coaching session that says, here are
Yeah,
two or three things you really need to be aware of as you're making this transition to make it well, to
yeah,
transition well.
yeah. I think the very first thing I start with is mindset, because mindset is so, so important. Because I hear some people, when they talk about working from home, they're going, oh, that's cool, I'm going to work in my pajamas, I'm going to work from bed. And it's just not going to give lasting success. So if we talk about an athlete before they play their game, they may not be feeling 100% before the game, but when they go and step on that court or that field, they put on their game face. Now, they only have to do that for 1 or 2 hours at a time, that game face. When we're working, we've got to do that for what, 6, 7, 8 hours a
Yeah.
day. So we've got to get our mindset correct. So I believe that you should have very clear when I'm working versus clear when I'm not. So when I get up, I I have to get dressed. I don't have to get dressed in a three-piece suit to
Mm.
go to work, but you won't have me in my pajamas. So what I use is a really, really simple analogy in saying, feel comfortable. You will be comfortable with what you wear for work. Is if your boss was going to ring the doorbell to your house, what would you be wearing? Would you be in your pajamas or not? And for most people, the answer is no.
Right.
So let's start with mindset. I think the second thing that we need to do is we need to get very, very deliberate about what we're going to achieve throughout the day. Um, and so, when are we going to start work? When are we going to finish work? Now, a lot of families, their children are home from school because the school's been shut down.
Yeah.
So, and people with young families, that's tough. You just can't lock yourself in the office for 8 hours and throw them the TV and hope
Right.
they're
Yeah.
okay.
Don't bother me, kids. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So they're going to be having to work in various segments throughout the day,
Mm-hmm.
and I like the idea of working in micro sprints, so they can get really, really focused. But they've got to really determine about what's the one, the two, the three things, whatever the number is that they're going to achieve through the day. And one of the best ways of doing that is to time box, is to allocate in their calendar what they're going to achieve in
Mm.
certain times. Now, the
That's good.
kids might get involved and they might throw that into chaos, but that just means in your working style, you'll need a little bit more slippage. So you need a little bit more what we call white space in the calendar to move things around, because if you overschedule yourself, you're just going to get frustrated at the end of the day that you haven't achieved everything. Or you're going to work to very late hours in the night to achieve everything. So I would have mindset. I would be very, very deliberate in what I'm doing as well.
I mean, I love the way you frame that, and especially the last one you were talking about is almost like I mean, it made me think of like the Pomodoro technique,
Yes.
the 25 minutes on and 5 minutes
Yep.
off type thing. And really just blocking time, blocking specific tasks on your calendar,
Yeah.
for times. I mean, who is it that said if you have more than three priorities, you have none?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
I,
Absolutely.
I love that
Y-
the way that it's framed, but
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things, I suppose, this is how I differentiate myself from other people. So, time management has always been a one size fits all approach. So if you wanted with pink and purple dots, and if that's how you work, great. But if you had it with green dots and it wouldn't work, so consultants like myself would basically say it didn't work for you because you didn't apply the principles.
mm,
Um, Now, one of the biggest shifts that I've seen is technology.
hmm,
Technology is so flexible now. My take is that everyone's got a way they do their best work. It's just that everyone doesn't do their best work all the time. So we could
it's good.
flip any of the principles on their head and line them up to the person's strengths and preferences. So we should be working based on their strengths, weaknesses, and preferences. Now, one size fits all works pretty well for 70% of the population, but not
Hmm.
100% of the
Right.
population. So if we had a more flexible approach to how we work based on our strengths, weaknesses, and preferences, then it would feel more natural and we could get more done. So if we use the Pomodoro technique at the moment, so for anyone who doesn't know it, it's work in a 25-minute sprint, have a 5-minute break, another 25-minute sprint, another 5-minute break. And you might do 4 of these and then you need a bigger break because you're quite exhausted at that
Hmm.
stage.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of the executives who I work with, their day isn't as structured as that. They don't get 25-minute breaks at a time,
Hmm.
but they've got to work in sprints. So we manipulate the Pomodoro and we say the sprint is whatever time you've got. So if you've only got 10 minutes, then you're in a sprint for the 10 minutes because you've got to keep things moving, whether that
Mm,
be 15 minutes the next one. But it's still using the same concept of the Pomodoro,
right.
maybe not quite as good as a Pomodoro, but it's better than having nothing at all.
Hmm. Yeah, I love the way that you kind of, you wrap the principles, you hold them kind of loosely, as you're
Yes.
applying to whatever that specific case is that you happen to be looking at. But and I could continue to ask you questions all night long or all day long, but I do want to honor your time. But is there anything you just want to really quickly wrap us up with today, and then tell people where the best place to find you online?
Yeah, yeah. I think with everything that we're going through at the moment, what we really need to do is we really need to look after ourselves, our own mental well-being. We need to get results. So we need to demonstrate our value at the moment. Now, if that's not quite fitting for you, that's where customized coaching can actually come in and help you. So, for people like myself, we do coaching like this via Zoom.
Hmm.
So that online coaching model works really, really well and can be really, really effective way of doing things. You can find me at my website, which is Glenn with two N's, Glenn, Tranter, Tranter.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I post every day on LinkedIn, and my marketing at the moment is predominantly through LinkedIn, where I'm sharing value around. So, anyone feel free to connect with me or reach out to me, um, because it's really about how can we lead ourselves, how can we lead our teams, how can we demonstrate our value. And it's very uncharted territories that we're in. We've had a lot thrown at us, but we've got to demonstrate value still whilst that's going on.
Well, what a way to wrap it up. And that is so true within in today's climate. It's as volatile as it's probably ever been as far as just the uncertainty, not necessarily economic, but just uncertainty of what life is going to look like, on the backside of this pandemic. But Glenn, thank you so much for just taking the time today and just, sharing your wisdom and your experience and your story and really just providing so much value for our listeners and really playing your part in just helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Glenn, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Kevin.